We're thrilled to be welcoming David Wojahn here this evening, and we're thrilled also to have the Ogden family with us. For those of you who don't know, Hugh Ogden was an incredibly special teacher at this institution who taught poetry for many, many years and was incredibly well thought of, just both by his students and also by the wider Hartford community, where you still, when you tell people that you teach at Trinity, hear stories about him and of his generosity to the wider poetry community here. So it's lovely to be remembering him in this way and to be welcoming his family, Cynthia and Kathy, and his grandson Benjamin here this evening. Claire Rossini, our own Claire Rossini, will be introducing David. Before that, Benjamin Ogden is going to read a poem by Hugh Ogden, his grandfather. So please welcome Benjamin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm very happy to be here, and I know my family's very happy to be here. And without further ado, I will read Lecture on the Tides. Lecture on the Tides. This is the point when the earth wobbles and the days lengthen and the years have to have days added. The point when the harness that pulls the sea pulls each of us into spring and makes us shudder again when the first red appears. The bleeding that quicker than not becomes green. You will always be here as long as water cuts deeper into soil and the coursing adds to what is left, as long as leaves are drawn out by the tide and buds bleed through bark. Even you, who are lost, will always be here as long as the moon circles into its line with the sun and the oceans respond, as long as we are able to find the moment when the winds make the globe waver, as long as the earth corrects itself, as long as pain takes faith in its bud and flowers. Thank you all.
That was really beautiful, Ben. Where did you go? Wherever you are. There you are. Yeah, lovely. And all that stuff about spring coming, are you sure? Okay. So, I'm going to say a little bit about David Wojahn's professional accomplishments and then say a few words about his work. David Wojahn's first collection, Ice House Lights, was chosen for the Yale Series of Younger Poets Award in 1981. That book was followed by 7 more, the latest being World Tree, published by the Pitt Poetry Series in 2011. He has received numerous honors, including fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Fine Arts Works Center in Provincetown. His 7th book, Interrogation Palace, was named a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in Poetry and was winner of the Folger Shakespeare Library's O.B. Hardison Award. World Tree was awarded the Academy of American Poets Lenora Marshall Prize for the most outstanding book of poetry published in 2012. It was also chosen as the winner for the 2012 Poets Prize and the Library of Virginia's Literary Award in Poetry. Professor Wojahn has published 2 books of truly fine criticism. We're really focusing on him as a poet tonight, but he's an extraordinary critic, and you should look for his work. Some of it's online, some of his essays are online. His work appears regularly in the American Poetry Review. And he's got 1 book of criticism out, Strange Good Fortune, and the second, From the Valley of Making, Essays on the Craft of Poetry, is out any day from the University of Michigan, so that's worth looking for. He is also the editor of 2 posthumous collections of the poetry of his late wife, Linda Hull. And the names of those 2 books, and again, Linda was an extraordinarily gifted poet. The names of those 2 books are The Only World and Collected Poems. David Wojahn lives in Richmond, Virginia, teaches at Virginia Commonwealth University, as well as in the MFA in Writing program at the Vermont College of Fine Arts up in Montpelier. Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson, those 19th century grandparents of American poetry, set the lyrical eye at the center of our tradition, and there's been trouble ever since. This focus on what one critic called the imperial self challenges a poet both to speak convincingly of his own experience and somehow to transcend it, thereby avoiding the making of poems that seem insular, as if written from within a hall of mirrors. The poetry of David Wojahn takes up that challenge with particular gusto. The poems in his latest book, World Tree, clearly are written in the voice of a speaker whose life seems close to David's own, complete with a wife, Noel, twin sons, a house, and a minivan whose model name is, what better one for a poet, the Odyssey, as in Honda Odyssey. Indeed, it seems David's poems have become more intimate over the years in their willingness to bear not only the poet's memories and loves and griefs, but the reality of his daily life with its unmanageable to-do lists. And don't we all know what those are? But is David Wojahn's commitment to connecting that lyrical eye, I mean that eye, not this orb, to the larger world of history, culture, and the imagination that gives these poems their raw, expressive energy. They exhibit an encyclopedic range of illusion. Peter Campion has called the poems panoramic, as their speaker names and wonders at the multitudinous ways our species abides in the world, from the despots, particularly politicians, to the troubled geniuses, many of them in the arts, to the visionaries, both politicians and artists among them. The poet could not manage this melding of the intimate to the large without mastery of his craft, and that mastery is demonstrated over and again in these poems and their succulent diction, which seems to dip into every bloodline that flows into our mongrel tongue, in their exploratory syntax that creates rhythms both sinuous and explosive. I often feel that David's enmeshment in jazz, he loves Miles Davis and John Coltrane, somehow has worked its way into his rhythms, which have the same kind of exploratory feel, it seems to me, as those musicians. And in the poet's rich repertoire of formal strategies, which include line and stanza patterns of his own invention, as well as fresh takes on received forms, such as the sonnet sequence. David has been doing sonnet sequences since his third book, and he's really made the form his own. You're going to see and hear excerpts from one of those fresh takes tonight, one of those sonnet series. But the range of a poet's intellect and the perfection of his craft is not enough to make work of lasting value. We know that. For that, the poems must be infused with an aim or quality that transcends the brilliance of any single lyric. That quality in David's work has been described variously by his readers. Norman Dubie speaks of the conscience in the poems, Jean Valentine of the work's egolessness, Alan Shapiro of the poet's imagination responsibly alive. I'd say that the poetry of David Wojahn is suffused with a profound humanity, possessed by a poet who believes in the power of his art to honor and expose and transform. In our hurried age of soundbite and selfie, this is a poetry to keep by your bedside, as it will affirm our deepest tuitions, your deepest tuitions, of what is worth saying and worth saying well. Let's welcome David Wojahn.
Well, thank you so much, Claire, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you to the Ogden family for your generosity. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very pleased to be at a place like Trinity that can boast of two exceptional poets in the form of Claire and Karen Berry. So it's a real honor to be here tonight. And can you hear me? Good. Good. I'm going to mainly read new poems tonight. I realized not long ago that the book I'm working on now is got a working title of Linear B, is pretty much about extinctions. It's about dead languages, about dead beloveds, creatures who will walk this world no more. I think poetry offers, I don't know, a tracery or a holograph of something that can allow us to view those things, if only for a very brief instant, as dwelling among us. And it always seems to me that poetry's most profound purpose is to give those gone things what Robert Lowell in a poem called their living names. So, and I did something that you might find a little odd. I gave you a handout. And so this will help you to understand some of the images and some of the references in the poems. And if you look on page 2 of the handout, there's something that probably most of you in this audience have never seen before or have only heard of obscurely. It's called a cassette tape. Back in the day, the 70s and 80s, it was an outmoded way that you would be able to record music. And I was thinking about this a couple of days ago when I was putting a playlist on iTunes that took about 10 minutes. And when you made a mixtape on a cassette tape, you had to do it in real time. There was labor, when the song was over, you'd have to run over and stop it. It was, it was back in the Pleistocene. So this poem takes place set in the 80s, which was a time when music was sometimes really astonishing and sometimes crap. And we also, those of you who don't know about cassette tapes, also probably don't know of a president we had called Ronald Reagan, who seems very revered now for reasons I don't understand. Poem's called Mixtape, to be brought to her in rehab. Black placard circle and the sound coaxed from diamond to rest within the acetate glimmer, the agon and the joys commingling. Nina Simone is conjuring the boat of Ra, little darling, from a long, cold, lonely winter, though outside it is August and is not all right. Double doors, then again double doors, you will sign yourself in, and they'll rifle your bag of oranges and candy bars, pry open the plastic case and hold the gray Maxell against the lights. Immense are the tears of Levi Stubbs. How sweet the honey bee. The Smiths are in a terrible place. Oh, oscillate wildly. Please, please, please let me get what I want. To be followed in turn by Mr. James Brown, his own pleas, trembling the Apollo rafters. Visiting hours. In the TV room, the Haldol reigns. The president struts among the SS gravestones, pompadour shiny as a new LP. His movie actor gait turned, thank God, to pastel vapor by Miami Vice. Flamingos starburst from the credits. Shyly, she will walk the corridor to meet you, your offerings of Earl Grey, the 2 black turtlenecks, nails cobalt, fingers a-tremble, gun-shy, screaming blue messiahs, Dylan at his nadir, adenoiding Brownsville girl. Down here, even the swap meets are getting a little corrupt. Richard Thompson, when the spell is broken, Jimmy Cliff's in limbo, waiting for the dice to roll. When her roommate leaves, you'll sit with her upon the bed. Awkward, you will small talk, staring at your hands. More doors, double doors, and triple the years. Down the carved names the future, with its labyrinths and tailspins, rooms giving way to rooms, the upturned car, the notebooks cuneiformed with numbers, pivot and gyre cache of RX pads stuffed into a roll-top drawer. 90 rabid, troubled minutes. Coda Robert Johnson. Stones on my pathway and the road seem dark as night. Her eyes in memory, an astonished blue. You reach inside your jacket, and she holds it in her upturned palm. From the bedside table, she lifts the Walkman, the button with its triangle, the click, the whir, the eddying forward. So, robots. They're not really as smart as we think they are or are supposed to be. You probably know that from seeing Schwarzenegger in the Terminator movies. But one thing that robots don't seem to be able to do is complete ordinary, typical domestic tasks very well. They're, in fact, immensely complex, those things. And I read a thing in the Times a couple of years back where it took engineers at MIT several years to train and develop a robot that would fold laundry. So this poem is called Elegy, Robot Folding Laundry. Examine pile. A stereo camera mounted in the robot's head looks for a central point of a towel lying in a pile. The robot grabs the center with one arm. Detect corners. The robot lifts and shakes and rotates the towel using an algorithm to visually locate and grasp the two adjacent corners. Untwist. The robot pulls the towel several times. If the robot sees the towel is twisted, it adjusts its tempo, rotating its grip until the towel's without twists. It heads to the table. Lay flat. It grasps the towel's corners with the short side up, adjusting its grip, and pulls the towel across the table's edge, again using an algorithm to smooth the towel flat. Re-examine and fold. The robot's camera estimates the towel size and position. The robot now may fold the towel in half by aligning at least 2 times the top and bottom corners. Fold again. Employing another algorithm, the robot then changes grips and repeats the flattening. The head's cameras pan the table. The robot folds the towel in quarters. Stack. The towel is placed neatly on a stack of towels. The robot angles back to the unfolded tile. Repeat. Rotate the towel, grasp the corner once again, etc. How my mother wallowed in her sorrow. But folding laundry was ritual joy. Always Sunday, always the piles, tabletop, high, always highballs, always bonanza, her head nimbused in pink curlers, her movements sudden and arrhythmic, and the mentholed fog of chain-smoked L&Ms. Always it is 7 o'clock, and already she's half snockered, flipping channels to 60 minutes. Examine pile. 2 long drags, 1 short swig, Airedale in the corner chasing rabbits and dream. Detect corners. She is heading kitchenward for gin. The MS makes her walk robotic, her scowl at the socks without mates. Untwist. She's got her rhythm now. Towers of dungarees, high as the parapets of Troy. Stacks of negligee and boxers lay flat. Cinders wafting down on piles of madras. Paisley short sleeves. Re-examine and fold. It's time for one last short one. New ice clinking its whispered rhythm as she navigates a gingham skyline. Fold again. Airy as popcorn the hankies teeter. Stack. Linens for their double beds. Headscarves. Jet black slips. Repeat. Repeat. Screensaver photo. Coalescing as I reboot. Head cocked. A melancholy vamp for the camera, L&M angled and burnt to the filter. She stands out of time. Memories, algorithms, brazen arrow, but always she stares me down. Laundry on the concrete in a heap. The other thing they can't do is write sestinas. If you look on the handout, you'll see at the very beginning probably the most famous poem of the classical world. It's called Animula, and it was supposedly written by the Roman Emperor Hadrian on his deathbed. There was a time in, the late Roman era when probably every literate person knew this poem. And a couple of years ago, a magazine asked 25 American poets to all do their translation of it, and it was remarkable to see how various those translations were. And a lot of them were very beautiful and upbeat because Hadrian just very eloquently says goodbye to his soul, and somehow mine got to be sort of a bummer. There's the poem. It's Little Soul, charismatic vagabond, honored guest, comrade of the body, now you shall depart into those regions fog-bound, anesthetized and barren. Here your laughter served you well. There, everlasting, your mouths stitched shut. So the poem I'm going to read, which is called My Father's Soul Departing, I incorporate all of that poem into what amounts to a little biography of my father. And Claire will know this. It incorporates some names of Minnesota towns you've never heard of and probably don't believe exist, but they're there. And I also read a statistic that I wanted to somehow make use of in this poem. Apparently 33% of Americans cannot remember the phone number of their landlines without calling them up on their cells. And so I wanted to get the phone number I had in childhood into the poem somehow. So it's My Father's Soul Departing. Assume, dear vagabond, you are permitted one last survey. Your 21 grams of sentience, little soul, the weight exactly of a ruby-throated hummer, shall hover the foliated stamens of your earthly measure. How you dart and pivot, honored guest, your thirst unquenchable. Here is Millbank, South Dakota, the saffron dust bowl where your father, dear comrade, raises his belt to crisscross your back, the 25 lesions. Here, the state hospital, your mother ballooning with insulin to induce the coma meant to cure the demons marauding the precincts of her abject brain. Now you shall depart. A milk run in Duluth, a quart bottle bursting on a frozen stoop, then a troop ship bound for Tunis, and into those regions of desert where you wander your 40 days. You rifle the pockets of a dead Wehrmacht corporal, Luger, and a snake-bite kit. And now you lean from a baggage car door, hefting a postal sack as the train slows for a station. Breckenridge or Sleepy Eye slows but will not stop for 27 years. The railroad men's hotels along the tracks, pulls of bourbon from a dented flask, the white Dakota plains, fog-bound, anesthetized, and barren. Montage of 7 Chevy Biscaynes, the songbook of Ernest Tubb, a shingled ranch deriving from the GI Bill, Garden 62477, the receiver lifted from its cradle as you weep to a stranger who's purloined your pension. Pulls of bourbon from a highball glass, from a coffee cup, the thrall and ratchet of ECT, your dress rehearsal for oblivion. What I remember, your laughter did not serve you well. Honored guest, comrade of the body, your farewell is complete. Blessed the descent which beckons. There, everlasting, your mouth stitched shut. Sorry about the tone of these. This is a love poem, so I'm changing tone here, I hope. And, there's this wonderful debate among physical anthropologists that's gone on for decades about, and it's kind of a chicken or the egg debate. It's what came first, language or the whites of our eyes, the sclera? And a lot of people, who are into this say that, that language could not grow sophisticated enough without the whites of the eyes developing so you could have the proper eye contact to engage in sophisticated communication with your mate. but then other people say that the opposite was true. So, you know, it's a very, very interesting kind of debate that will probably go on for a long time. This poem also contains, I'll have to admit, the very worst line I have ever written. So it's called Sclera. And there's a little epigraph to it. It is likely Homo ergaster is the first human ancestor who had visible sclera, whites of the eyes identical to those of modern humans. You share the kill, fingers circling a thigh bone shattered open. One hand sucks the copious marrow, the other hovers, then strokes the still nascent chin of your mate. Strokes and strokes. An all-divine morrow. Your guttural whisper, tincture of noun and verb, franix a work in progress. But the eyes are besnowed and watchful. They dart and waver, then fix into consummating gaze. Sclera, aglow and glossy as multi-purpose 24 weight, wherein slow iris and russet cornea stalk their text, more ancient than runic or linear B. Oh, my beloved, by the windows of the soul we fuck. We throw the curtains open, bodies viscid with the polleny morn, and how these eyes are locked. Yeah, it's the windows of the soul we fuck. But I like it. Thank you. Last page in the handout. This is a photo of the last Tasmanian tiger. The Tasmanian tiger is an extinct marsupial carnivore. It didn't look at all like a tiger when the British came into Australian Tasmania. They called it a tiger. They were very afraid of it, but when you see pictures of it, they look like dogs with stripes. I've been fascinated with them for about 20 years, ever since I saw one stuffed in the museum in Hobart in Tasmania. And the last one died in the Hobart Zoo in 1936. His name was Benjamin. And if you go on a website called the Thylacine Museum, you can see him. And there's about a 2-minute film of him. He was an immensely sad animal. And one thing that I think, bespeaks the fact that, they were sad rather than mean, as the colonists thought, is, you see this mouth way wide open? This is called the threat yawn response. And the only big defense, or the big weapon that the Tasmanian tiger had, was it could open its jaws wider than any other known mammal and apparently scare other mammals. So that's in there. It's also, you probably don't know this about marsupials, but females have the kangaroo pouches, but males have a pouch too called a scrotal sac, which is to protect the male genitalia. So I know it's a cliche, but every time the species comes to extinction, we come nearer to our own. And I don't think we can slow that process, but we can at least honor the perished. It's a poem called 2-Minute Film of the Last Tasmanian Tiger. It's after a poem by Rilke. His vision from the constant cascade of chicken wire has grown so benumbed it contains nothing else save for his lastness. Though he doesn't know this, yet he knows in the manner that beasts can know that his name is Benjamin, and the name comes with meat scraps slotted through the wire by an apen figure who is headless in the grainy black and white. A zoo in Hobart, 1933. On his haunches he rises, kangaroo-like, following the movement of the keeper's hand. Look closely, and you see the scar where the mouth of a trap slammed its teeth into his left rear leg. nothing tiger-like, save the vague black ribbing of stripe along his rump. The size and shape of your average retriever or lab, though more forlorn. And he paces his cramped circles, though no mighty will stands paralyzed. Official moniker, thylacine. As he rises again to his haunches, we glimpse the marsupial scrotal sac, the pouch to protect his jewels, as he patted the outback bush he'll never see again. And now the ears perk up. The curtain of the pupils parts, and the mouth, the storied mouth, the jaws hinging open, wider than those of any other mammal, quickens in the threat yawn response, the cavernous throat. Benjamin, Benjamin, proffering abyss, tiger, tiger, burning the bright blacklit void, our tour guide, our madly pacing, limping Virgil. For 3 more years he paces and rears, chicken parts swallowed from the disembodied, chain-mailed hand. His kidneys will fail. Sarcoptic mange will mottle his stripes, and torso to his scabbed relief map directions to terra incognito. And thus his skin was deemed to be of such poor condition, no attempt was made to stuff him. This is a little-known fact. October is National Archive Month. And this last October, the National Archives and Academy of American Poets got together on a project in which they asked 12 American poets to go to the National Archives website and write about anything on the website. And then we all went to the National Archives and recorded our poems about the objects that we had picked. Very strange thing. I read it in the portico of the National Archives, so I look like I'm in a Spartacus movie in this, classical thing. But the poem I picked, or the subject I picked, if you look on the handout, is an immensely haunting photo. It's made by Wojahn, who was a wonderful photographer in the early part of the last century. He had been hired by Theodore Roosevelt's administration to document the horrors of child labor in America. He went all over the South, and the photo you see is called Catawba Cotton Mill, 1908, and they love to have children in cotton mills because if you look over on the right, there's a bottom thing that you'd lose a lot of cotton fiber in it, so they'd have the kids crawl under there to grab the cotton fiber that would otherwise be lost. And they had names for the jobs that were very strange, like, doffers and little piecers. But they also got very strange and horrible diseases, things that were called like mattress maker's fever and weaver's cough. So this poem is about the photo, and it ends with a quote from Hein, who was a political progressive. He grew up in Wisconsin, so I will dedicate this poem to the governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker, who yesterday signed right-to-work laws that probably are going to allow child labor again in America. So thank you, Mr. Walker. Catawba Cotton Mill, 1908, a photo by Wojahn. Propping his tripod, Hein remembers childhood snowfall in Wisconsin, flakes careening in prairie wind. A red sleigh skimming a frozen lake, curly-cued breath mists of 2 dappled drays. But this is a blizzard of cotton dust from the looms and 30,000 spindles, gauze air, whirlwind of innumerable floaters. The thermometer reads 103. And for these 7 10-year-olds, childhood is 6 10-hour shifts. And on the 7th day they rest, heads nodding over hymn books, the drone of temperance and hellfire. But this is din, not drone. The spindles, manic prayer wheels, the doffers and the little piecers skittering on hand and knee beneath the clatter of the looms, patrolling for clumps of cotton waste. This is weaver's cough and mattress maker's fever, the mad percussive chivalry and glossolalia. But then, for a moment, it ceases. The foremen have gathered their doffers and stilled the looms and spindles. 6 boys, a lone girl. The foreman adjusts his derby, pointing them toward the cyclop eye, Heinz 5x7. They are ordered to look solemn, as if they could look otherwise. Pulled slide, the flash pan dusted with powder, the sizzle of the room erupts in lights. Where the punctum, where the studium, to end your life at 25 or 30, missing fingers, mangled hands, to walk somnambulant to a sullen dormitory bunk, picking cotton shavings from your hair, mattress ticking, spat onto a rude pine floor. But Hein has set his flash pan in his case, broken down his tripod. Fiat lux. Hein gathers his work and faintly smiles, adjusting his bowler and making a fist, as if to attest that in this foul rag and sweatshop, in this charnel house of ceaseless motion, his lens might render one fugitive instant of dignity. Light is required, wrote Hein. Light in floods. I must have trouble writing recently, so that was a commissioned poem. Here's another commissioned poem. You might remember that last year was the 200th anniversary of Thomas Jefferson's death. So the poet Lisa Russ Sparr commissioned 50 American poets to write any kind of poem they wanted about Jefferson or Monticello. And I thought about it, and if you look at the page right before it's somewhere here. Oh yeah, right before Benjamin. You'll see a very weird thing, and it kind of looks like a Joseph Cornell collage, but it's actually a page from what's called the Jefferson Bible, or one of the Jefferson Bibles. There are actually 3 of them. Jefferson was a really good deist, so he thought that Christ was a great teacher, but he thought anything in the New Testament that was miraculous was hooey. So he edited the King James very heavily to include just the passages he deemed authentic. And he did that kind of like a DJ with turntables. He had about 5 Bibles, like a French one and a Vulgate, and he cut them up and put them together. And finally, he got his authentic Bible, which was about 25 pages long. And you can see him in the Smithsonian. So just from cutting and pasting, he got those 25 pages, and he cut out the chapter 11 of John entirely, because that's, of course, the one where Christ raises Lazarus, and it's a very dramatic passage. And, of course, at the end of that chapter, the Pharisees realized that, Christ had better be arrested. So it's high drama, but that's not in the Jefferson Bible. So I incorporate some lines from both John 11 and from Jefferson himself talking about the Bible in this poem. It's called Jefferson Composing His Bible. It's got a quote from him. It says, "I composed the operation for my own use by cutting verse by verse out of the printed book and arranging the matter which was evidently his. Candlelight, straight razor, ruler, an umber King James, nearly midnight, unwigged, in his nightshirt. He set his pantograph away, and the house slave Ursula has brought him port, a bit of Stilton. Jefferson is raising Lazarus, 4 days entombed. Oh, take away the stone. Mary, redacted, who goeth to the grave to weep there. redacted to the one that was dead, the one bound head and foot with grave cloths, his face bound with a napkin. The one who, in Giotto, stands flanked with a crowd who mask their faces, not to hide their awe, but to endure his stench. The one who Caravaggio props naked in the arms of thugs, rigor mortis to cruciform, but goldening as the wonder-working arm reaches out. Lazarus, come forth. And Jefferson's razor commences its business. Along the ruler, the slicing begins, John 11 entire. The gash extended, acute and violent as open heart, though when he cuts his index finger, 3 drops of blood, it must be the port ensanguined the chief priest and Pharisees as they plot in the temple to take him away. And the operation is complete. He sets his hexagon of superstition down, one more blow for the reason that shall free us from the mere abracadabra of the mountebanks calling themselves the priests of Jesus. Marginal, illiterate, a barefoot rabbi who spoke some truths. June in Monticello. The window by his desk stands open, susurrant click of cricket and peeper, a slather of fireflies darting the ochre and broad beams of the kitchen garden. Candle flicker. The night wind gently turns the good book's pages, its vellum window shorn of miracle. The words remaining, sublime, benevolent, and easily distinguishable as diamonds on a dunghill. Oh, boundless are the mysteries of the visible world. Pantograph, the quill pen tempered, the rubied port and its quickening thrall. The razor on his desk sits locked. I forgot to mention to you that he was one of 3 people in America who owned this device called a pantograph, where you could connect the device to a pen and make a copy of a letter with another pen. So he was very proud of that. I'm going to read 2 more poems. Title of this one is called For the Scribe Gar Una of Uruk, 3000 BC. And Gar Una was the author of what is probably the earliest known human signature. Imagine this. He's the first person to ever sign his name. And, if you've studied anything about, cuneiform and Sumerian, it's, really, really hard to learn to read and write. They have thousands of characters. One of the problems is a lot of the characters can only be read in context. Like the character for arrow is the same as the character for life. So you have to read it in that sort of context. There's a funny word in here called boustropheden, but that just means writing that moves to one end of the margin and turns around and kind of weaves like that, and in a sort of curlicue. Sumerian was like that. What else is in there? There's I rip off a couple lyrics from a great band called Iron and Wine here, and but mostly it's about the effect, and it can be both shocking and beautiful. I think of coming across a book, margin notes of someone who's departed, margin notes of someone who you've loved, and in this case I quote some of them, and they're margin notes to William Blake's The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. So for the scribe Gar Una of Uruk, 3000 BC. The arrow and life were homonyms, that his name predates all others in size, sun-baked on a slab of Euphratean clay. Stylus, a broken reed, though it carries somehow the bedazzled, opalescent mojo of transfiguration. The hand which holds at edges right, and reaching the margin circles back, right to left and east to west, boustropheden, so that inscription is a form of weaving. What matters that the context is grain. is cattle and goat, chamber pot and sandal, 3 spear shafts hewn of cedar, flagons of unguents for the temple stores. Enumerate, enumerate. Life and arrow, our endless numbered days and feathered, so to fly relentless in unpitying sun. The one whom I loved is dead. The one whom I loved is clay. Enumerate, enumerate. Life and arrow, they are gone now, the days we shared, gone 18 years, 6 months, 7 days, 11 hours. And thus I open the major romantic poets and keep vigil for her hand. Her hand lives on in concord, peerless with William Blake, the Proverbs of hell decoded. So he took me through a stable, vision of materialism, and through a church down into a vault, at the end of which mill of abstraction we did come to a cave. Down the winding cavern we groped our tedious way. Materialism equal Locke and Newton. I also have the Bible of hell, which the world shall have, whether they will or no. Creation and fall, the angel embraces fire. Blue ink, green ink, pencil. Kentish Town, the 80s, window open and the pewter light ensilvering the heath. I watch the book upon her desk, pages a-tremble in the evening wind. She is out somewhere in the leather jacket. She is out somewhere to score. Blue ink, green ink, the angel embraces fire. Guide my hand now, O scribe. Let me speak of her as though she might stand before me still. Enumerate, enumerate, the fog transfiguring, the chastening light. Guide my hand, O scribe, so that I might see her from this window we've hewn of stylus, of keyboard and character. Guide my hand so that she may walk below, emerging corporeal, parting the tube station crowd, jacket, worn boots, her scarf that is forged of electrum, her scarf that is molten, her scarf that is flame. Below me she stands, arrow and life. Guide my hand, O scribe, instruct me to affix her here, that she may for a moment raise her head toward me, so that in this blessed gesture I may linger. Okay, one more poem, and thank you for putting up with this. I remember the late poet William Matthews at one point said to me that, basically all lyric poems are a form of bird call. Every lyric poem is, here I am. Which I was thinking about not long ago. I was in a restaurant, and, a woman was at the table near me was showing her boyfriend this new app she'd got on her iPhone that played recordings and showed little images of every American songbird. Really cool app. But then the conversation between them kind of got a little hormonal. So that's in the poem. Two more things. My father once told me that he believed I was conceived on New Year's Eve, 1952 and 1953, around 11 o'clock. And I thought that was very neat because, 1952 was such a, it was Cold War, awful things were happening, but it was a great year for discovery. I mean, Hillary climbed Everest, Watson and Crick mapped DNA, and a linguist named Michael Ventris translated the Minoan language, Linear B. So that's all in there. Poem is called Ode to FOXP2, and FOXP2 is the gene that is necessary for all vocalization, and they believe it's also necessary for human language. One more thing. For years and years, I had this line in my head that I thought was like the most beautiful line of poetry I'd ever written. It was, "Yellowfin a slather with wasabi." And I kept trying to get it into poem after poem after poem. And so finally I got it into this poem, which of course now is set in a sushi restaurant. But so I guess this is my version, Here I Am. Ode to Fox P2, a gene with essential roles in vocalization, speech, and language. The songbird's glyph is thumbtack-sized but glowing. Scroll up, scroll down, warbler, thrush, the common crow, each asserting its location and intentions from a speaker greatly miniaturized and embedded in the phone beside the purse on the restaurant table. An app the woman shows the man as their chopsticks address the amazing role. North American songbirds, every species, coo, coo, ree, choo, choo, choo. A hyoid bone unearthed in Sinai proves Neanderthal was capable of full human speech. So the man is mouthing, ah, the woman's stocking foot slithers up the inside of his thigh. Here I am. Pinpoint my location, my plumage, neckwear fashioned of patterned silk, cleavage, fishnet, and red stiletto upturned on a bistro carpet, lips ensanguined, hazed with gloss, coo-coo-ree. Utter and call your way to thy plumage. Yellowfin, a slather with wasabi, napkin to his mouth, the man sighing, ah, ah, and ah, to be continued. The hyoid, delicate and avian, vibrating its own corporeal cry of middle C, enabling Deborah Harry from a speaker in the ceiling to bemoan her heart of glass, replaced by Big Joe Turner, gutturalling, honey, hush, come on out of that house and stop that yakety yak, enabling the concept of glyph, wasabi, stiletto heel of the heart likened to a towel shredded wine glass stomped upon beneath the canopies in Jewish weddings, enabling Agno Domini, the concept of 1952. The one, a stick-thin Giacometti man. The 9, just a boy, encephalitic head bent down, no doubt in sorrow, though the 5 will soon give birth to twins, one to die in utero. And now the caboose of 2, rearing swan, all serpent and hiss, cuckoo ring, sing cuckoo, loud sing cuckoo. Summer is a comin' in, summer, 1952, Sir Hilary and forgotten Sherpa scaling Everest, and Watson and Crick unraveling low the trellised vine of DNA, and Michael Ventris, after 17 years of labor, identifying linear B as an early form of Greek, enabling time travel, though the house of the past is jugs of oil, oxen in the stables of King Minos, a bill for sale for 18 Cypriot slaves. My plumage, coo-coo-ree, yellowfin, wasabi, and yakety yak, oh yes, oh good, good, good. My father setting a thin black platter on a whirling disc, to hear Roy Acuff tell a beautiful thought concerning the great speckled bird. I am glad to know my name is recorded. He loud sing as seeing the old year out, and foxtrotting with my mother having ripped December 1 and 9 and 5 and 2 from a shotgun apartment kitchen wall. My plumage, my heart of glass, my early form of Greek, a howl, outed 9 months later to the day inside the concept of Miller Hospital, shining on a hill atop the concept of St. Paul, Minnesota, house of the past. Hyoid, loud sing, here I am, Lord, won't you send me my plumage. Amen. Thank you.
David might be kind enough to take a question or two. Anybody would like to ask him a question?
Sure.
Don't be shy. I know some of you have questions. You need them for my class.
Just don't ask how much I made last year. Especially from royalties. Really don't ask that one.
Yes.
You said that one of the poems contained the worst line of poetry you ever wrote.
Yeah.
You shared the best line of poetry. Can you tell us what the worst was?
Oh, the worst one was By the Windows of the Soul. We fuck. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how your taste in music has impacted your writing process?
Oh yeah, well, taste in music. You know, well, you'd have to talk to my wife, who always complains about the hundreds and hundreds of CDs that are lining my study, and always telling me, well, that's an outmoded sort of format. They're all going to be worthless in a while. But I just, I love music. I love popular music. I love rock and roll. I love Americana. I love folk, and and I've loved American pop music since the 60s and 70s, and people like Dylan and Richard Thompson have been just as important to me as influences, I think, as and poets have. So it's been really essential. If you grew up in the 60s or 70s like me, you first discovered Dylan, and then Dylan mentioned, say, Dylan Thomas, or he mentioned Nietzsche, and then you went to read Nietzsche. So that was my entrance. That was my guide point.
Don't be shy. Really? No more questions?
Can you talk about your writing process, especially with teaching? And you do a lot of teaching, and how do you, I don't know, how do you balance it?
Oh, it's hard. Basically, I think a lot of times I take sort of scattered ideas in a notebook, or I get something that is a concept for a poem. Sometimes that can be sonic, sometimes that can be thematic. It always varies. Sometimes I get a line in my head and that starts to write the poem. Sometimes, I'll watch the video of the Tasmanian tiger hours upon hours and figure that I somehow have to do homage to it. So it's always a circuitous process. There's, never any real sense of willfulness or consciousness about it. There's always a lot of Randall Jarrell said that you define a poet. A poet is defined as somebody who, after a lifetime of standing out in the rain, gets hit by lightning 3 or 4 times. And, it's mostly standing out in the rain and just, writing a lot of bad stuff until I finally stumble on something that is an avenue I could go up. But I'm also, as a writer, I think, about half of the time I write in meter or received forms, and about half of the time I write in free verse. But it's usually that I hear something, and that usually makes me write in some kind of metrical pattern, whether I like it or not. And often it's not when I write something that I have to work against that tendency, because it can get very da-dum, da-dum, da-dummy. That's a technical word. Any other questions? Well, thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it.